Imagine a nice Sunday morning when you and your mum decide to venture to a museum only for it to be stampeded with vicious and angry protesters who continue to sputter soup all over famous artwork. Well, roughly a year ago, this was the reality for civilians at the London's National Art Gallery in mid-October. Throughout the last 30 years, we've all seen the planet experience what we all know as climate change or global warming. You know, rising sea levels, shrinking mountain glaciers, and so on. The media in the last 18 months, it has become quite evident that these people demanding immediate change, and I agree. But do we really think that gluing our hands and causing destruction to famous artwork or chaining ourselves to buildings is actually going to enforce any change? Instead, it's wreaking havoc and blocking our city streets, destroying Vincent van Gogh's paintings, just to name a few, portraying the wrong message. Although there is no denying the fury of climate activists, however, little do we know that they are actually unintentionally making the environmental problems worse. For example, the completely unnecessary paper usage as protest signs and banners, along with the outrageous current communication tactics that these activists are using in order to send their message or for their message to be heard. We need more potent forms of communication to influence and promote change. I find it interesting how climate activists come off as highly educated on the matter. But if they were really so educated, wouldn't they be aware of the fact that the manufacturing of paper is actually releasing nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide into the air, which is purely responsible for climate change? I mean, when you first think of activism and protesting, I'm guessing the first thing you think of is crowds of people gathered around holding and chanting with big paper banners. Protesters want to attack everyone else for their bad habits when they're actually contributing to climate change, when they're part of the issue too. Hypocritical, right? A quote from the Forge Runner says that paper has possessed a both artistic and political dimension as long as it has existed. The more widely available it became throughout throughout the world, the more that it could be used to dialogue with power by artists and by political change makers. From this quote, it was obvious that the paper usage has become a quite strong material for humans in order to get their ideas down on a page. But why can't we as young people create a new stereotype and influence a new normal by using websites, social media platforms, or even just the power of our own voice? We can all agree that serious action needs to be taken in order to solve climate change. I just think it's pretty rich of protesters to be carrying around signs that are actually part of this worldwide crisis. Additionally, how am I, a 15-year-old girl, supposed to look at these people as inspirational and wise when all I see is the constant ruckus, for example, the incident in London only a few months back? It's funny how people want to call themselves activists. However, their recent outrages, I would call them vigilantes. How are we as young people supposed to watch these people commit these acts, causing this mayhem, and no one is able to focus on the real issue at hand, climate change? I want to see change, and it affects me to see how people are making a joke and destroying the efforts of everyone else who is continuously making a mockery of climate change activists. People are gluing themselves to buildings. They are destroying famous artwork and screaming on our streets. Now, how exactly is this behaviour going to do anything? Late last year, it was reported that a couple of individuals calling themselves passionate activists threw, poured and splattered soup all over famous Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers painting in London National Gallery. A quote from The Guardian reported, "They may be trying to get people to think about the issue, but all they really end up doing is getting people really annoyed and angry. And in my opinion, I believe that this behaviour is appalling and needs to be dealt with in a more respectful and influential manner." Just recently, Greta Thunberg was arrested. An AP News article states that the Metropolitan Police Force on Wednesday that the 20-year-old Swedish campaigner was one of 26 people charged after the protesters gathered outside the luxury intercontextual hotel during the Energy Alliance Forum. Following the arrest, ABC News released another article explaining that police said they engaged in conversations with the protesters about allowing some access to the venue safely and prevent serious disruption to the hotel guests, but some of the activists of course, refused to move from the road. Yet another example of how activists aren't enforcing change, instead they're just damaging it by dragging the public eye to the completely wrong problem at hand. Instead of young people seeing a positive change for climate change in the media, we are confronted with new horrific outrage or arrests being made of these people that I spoke about earlier. They are forgetting the real issue at hand here. Think about it. If these people were educated on climate change, then they would know that by doing all of this big, bold, outrageous acts, it's only making it worse for all of us. Instead of getting public attention by causing havoc and stress, can't we all just play our part for the planet in order to see some real change, such as using less paper? Or instead of throwing foods at famous artworks, perhaps starting up websites, social media pages for people to learn how to act on the crisis of climate change. Because at the rate it's going now, nothing is moving forward. As climatologists have proven, climate change is progressively getting worse and worse. And if there's one thing we can take away from this mess, is that everyone wants the same thing. I would like to reiterate that it's not only the destruction of public property being at harm here, it's the outrageous acts from activism being made to grasp public attention. But the excessive use of paper on their signs and banners is only making the problem worse. We all want change, so let's approach this in the right way and use more sensible and impactful resources, such as the internet today, that will only benefit our environment, but convey the right message, and put a stop to this nonsense that these uneducated people are creating.